Gut, dann herzlich willkommen zu unserer heutigen Veranstaltung, die wir als Kooperationspartner.
Okay, I think we're having kind of technical problems here, so maybe I can just continue. I didn't get everything that Jan Lukas Gescher just said, but yeah, welcome y'all. I'm gonna introduce to you our speaker for today, which is Dachi Imedadze, who's already in the meeting and is gonna tell us something about student activism in the present. Dachi studied social sciences at the Free University of Tbilisi, and while already pursuing his bachelor's degree there, he was deeply influenced by the principles of liberty. He actively engaged in civic activism in Georgia and thus has organized awareness campaigns, events, and other protests. Additionally, he also ventured into the dynamic realm of communication and advertising and gained valuable working experience there. And he also refined his skills as a creative copywriter during this time. Currently, Dachi is part of the groundbreaking Shame movement, which is pioneering the largest civil society movement in independent Georgia's history. As the head of strategy there, he's driven by the organization's mission to promote democratic systemic reforms and pave the way for Georgia's integration into the European Union and NATO. Right now, the Shame movement is also doing a mass campaign to mobilize votes for the upcoming parliamentary elections in Georgia that are going to take place in October. And with this short introduction, I will now hand over to Dachi, who's going to tell us more about student activism. Welcome, Dachi. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much for the intro, Paulina. Hi, everyone. We have a few guests at the Zoom meeting, and I also know we have a YouTube stream. So, hi, everyone. Thanks for coming in. Thank you for finding time and your interest. I have a few slides as a presentation prepared for you to get you to know what it's like to have a student activism affairs here in Georgia, and not only in Georgia. I think this is a well studied maybe or well known trend that is almost everywhere across the globe. So let's just delve into it, and then afterwards, of course, we're going to have the Q&A session. I'm sure there will be a few questions. I hope there will be a few questions. So anytime, of course, after the presentation, you can just ask or type in the chat. So both options are okay. Let me just share the screen real quick. Okay, so now we have the presentation here. So yeah, reimagining student activism through social media. Why social media, right? The first slide suggests how do we use the social media as a mean of communication and as a mean of getting your message across to the people when you're trying to be active about something, be active about a certain issue, try to campaign about it, try to mobilize people around it, try to find new allies and form a coalition around it, etc., etc. In our times, social media is the best tool to do it, and I'm going to show how it worked for our case in Georgia. But before we go there, I'm sure that you might have heard of Georgia, or you might not have. So I have prepared just a tiny little video for you. It was not done by me, but I think it's a very good video about Georgia to get you a brief kind of idea of what Georgia is about. Let's just see this video now.
It's time for you to discover tons of totally new things fitted in a small country, Georgia.
By the way, just to check, do you hear the voice, the sound of the video?
Yes, we can hear it.
Cool.
Let's do it through its unique alphabet called Anbani, and the first character of which is A, Anbani, the Georgian word for our unique alphabet. B, Basiani, a great battle then, a great club now. G, Galactioni, nation's beloved poet, and a good reason why it would be great if you spoke Georgian. D, Gmanisi hominins, the oldest Europeans yet discovered. E, Enguri, a roaring river falling into the Black Sea in a spectacular region of Georgia, Abkhazia, currently occupied by Russia. V, Vazi, same as wine, and the main symbol of Georgia's 8,000 years of winemaking. Z, Zeg, is the Georgian word for the day after tomorrow. We also have a separate word for the day after tomorrow. T, Tamar the king. She ruled Georgia to its golden age, and she was a king. E, Iremi, a deer, and a very dear painting by Pirosmani. K, Kaukasioni, beautiful as the Caucasus chain between two seas. L, Lelo, a ball game played for centuries, and the main reason, rugby, is our game. M, Media. Little is known that this character of Greek mythology comes from Kolchis, present-day Western Georgia. N, Natrische, wish tree, a book, a movie, a song, and a magic wish tree. O, Osuri, a dance from a region of Georgia, also occupied by Russia. P, Urmareli, the generous feast that symbolizes famous Georgian hospitality. J, Jruandeli, a beautiful word that gives you goosebumps, and that's what it means. R, Rustaveli, the epic he wrote 9 centuries ago will inspire centuries ahead. S, Sakartvelo, while the world calls us Georgia, we refer to ourselves as Sakartvelo. T, Khemali, the sour plum sauce that comes in as many different tastes as there are grannies in Georgia. U, Ushkuli, Georgian village that is one of the highest settlements in Caucasus, Europe. P, Pachulia Zaza, a very tall man from Georgia and an NBA champion. K, the character that looked like a cross, to represent Christ, Jesus Christ. R, Vino, our word for wine, that is mainly produced with an ancient method of Kvevri winemaking. H, Hintrisi Angelosi, Hintrisi angel, 13th century fresco, our perception of harmony. Sh, Sheregilebi, Eccentrics, a movie about free spirit that somehow escaped the Soviet censorship. Ch, Chagrulo, polyphonic folk song, started playing in the space on Voyager 2 in 1977. Ts, Tsurtaveli, the author of the hagiographic feminist novel written in 5th century. Z, Zalertobashia, motto of the country that means stronger together. Ts, Tsutisopeli, one single word saying that life is just a minute. J, Gavjavazilia, founding father of Georgia and the main reason of country's liberal progress. H, Khridoli, Georgian martial art by monks. Yeah, kind of a Georgian kung fu. J, Jeans generation, generation of Georgians who wore jeans as a sign of protest against Soviet regime. H, for hashtag Georgian characters, it is the end of alphabet and the beginning of bigger journey. There is much more to discover. Georgia.
Okay, thank you for delving into this 4-minute long video. You've heard some of the key phrases: Russian occupation, protest against the Soviet regime, and you're going to hear those words again during my presentation. And you also heard maybe Bassiani. I'm sure the Germans local that are here in the meeting, they might have known the nightlife of Berlin, of course they know, and the nightlife of Tbilisi. So I'm sure you found some of the references there. Okay, so let's get to the topic. Here you see an excerpt from New York Times, 1978, which says, Soviet Georgians take to streets to save their state language. This is a very rare piece where the Western media would write anything about Georgia, about like specific countries within the Soviet Union, within this, with like specific things that were happening within these countries during the Soviet times. But this is very important because in 1978, it was the first time ever in the history of the Soviet Union where people protested, and I mean like mass protests. In 1978, the local Communist Party of Georgia tried to cancel the status of the Georgian language as an official state language and change it with the Russian one. So back then, when it was I think the most, well, as most of the Georgians, the generation of my parents and their friends describe, it was the best time of the Soviet times, meaning that there was peace, there was welfare more or less for everyone. Of course, they were poor, but they mean that, well, they had at least to eat something in Georgia. So it was strange that people took to the streets, but of course, this nationalistic sentiment about the language, about one of the key elements of the national identity, which was tried to be taken away from us, was not acceptable. So people took to the streets, and who did that? Of course, the students did. Of course, the students, my mother, who was 11 at that time, she was in the middle school, and she recalls how she saw a lot of high school students just sneaking out from the back doors of the school to attend the rallies. They were going on for a few days, and on April 14th, the government, the Communist Party, canceled its initiative to change the state language to Russian because they thought that the protest could just turn into a bigger and bigger protest wave. And it was funny because the officials from that time said that no demonstration happened. It was just us canceling this idea. We should have thought better, etc., etc. But the truth is that on those demonstrations, there were banners and calls from people to say, damn the Russian Empire, to translate it roughly. Russian Empire, because of course, Soviet Union was based on the Soviet Russian regime, which occupied the other 14 republics of the Soviet Union. So of course, it runs deep in Georgia, as it is in every country. Most of the activists, most of the protest movements are born within the youth group, student group movements, and they are the ones who lead the front, and they are the ones who always get people around them, rally around the flag, the other parts of the society, and then, of course, if they're able to, they bring progress and success to the cause. And that's how it happened in Georgia in 1978. And I mentioned my mom. Sorry. I mentioned my mom, who 10 years later, in 1988, on the left, of course, you will not read any of this because it's all in Georgian, but the left one is basically a prescription from the doctors, and they write what she has to eat. And mostly all of these things are warm milk, boiled egg, some dairy products, and yeah, baked something, whatever. And the reason that they gave this to her was that she was on hunger strike for almost 10 days. And it was like a dry hunger strike. She did not eat anything. She only drank water. And of course, she was not the only one. It was tens and hundreds of students, her fellow students, who did this on the main avenue, on the main street of Tbilisi, outside it back then. Now it's the parliament, but back then it was the administration building of the government. And 3 years later, Georgia gained independence, but it came under a big price. The national movement that was happening within Georgia, and then it followed in the other former Soviet state as well. The Russians tried to punish it very roughly, and on the bottom, in the center, you see my grandma, the mother of my mother, who died because of cancer. But the reason that she got cancer was that during April 9th, 1989, the Soviets dispersed one of the rallies that was going on in Tbilisi. And they used the tear gas, which was poisonous, basically. And again, a few hundred of people got cancer out of that. This is a excerpt from the local newspaper that said, "One more life," with 3 dots. And it was a letter that would basically tribute to her soul or something like that. And at the end of this tiny little column, it says the committee of victims of April 19th. So this was the scale of how much it looked. And on the right, you see the Communist Party ticket. I'm sure if anyone is from the East Germany and their parents have been talking to them, giving stories of what it looked like, I'm sure they even might have something like this, have had something like this. But this would, everyone had that in the Soviet times, also in Georgia, in other republics as well. The Communist Party ticket, which was basically a membership card for the party. And although my grandma had this ticket and the card, she participated in every protest that was going on there. And in the top right corner, you see a former Georgian flag, which was changed in, I think, 2004, but this was the Georgian flag for about like 15 years. And she sewed this with her hands. So this was not bought somewhere. Of course, you couldn't buy it anywhere because it was forbidden. You could not openly say anything that would be pro-Georgian, like pro-Georgian independence. And of course, people just did it in their houses. So yeah, that's what my grandma did, and that's what all of these students did. They might have been part of the Communist Party because they were required to. That was the only way to survive and navigate in those times. But on the other hand, they would participate in the rallies that were against the Soviet regime, and they would even, some of them would die because of the Soviet regime. So it runs deep in Georgia, also in my family, funny enough. The student activism and students and youngsters being vocal about issues important for the country, important for the community, of course, important for the individual liberty as well. That's a tradition, I think. But now let's go more into current times and fast forward to June 2019. As Paulina mentioned, I'm part of the SHAME movement, which is the biggest civic movement in the independent history of Georgia. We have up about like 50 members, and then a wider network of activists across the whole country of about like 200 people, almost in every, almost of the, maybe every city and every town, not to the villages, of course, of the country. So what happened in June 2019? This image explains a lot. So this guy, the one with the glasses sitting in the chair of the speaker of the Georgia parliament, is Sergei Gavrilov, who is a Russian MP, member of the Russian Communist Party, who was invited to Georgia as part of a kind of inter-parliamentary assembly of Orthodox countries. For those who don't know, Georgia is an Orthodox country. We don't have the state religion, but still like 85% of Georgians are Orthodox. So countries like Serbia, Greece, Russia, Moldova, I think back then, participated in this interparliamentary assembly. And in 2019, Georgia was the host of it. So we hosted them, and it was like, people didn't like it. We heard news about it, but it would just be a random Tuesday of something going on inside the parliament. It should not have been a big thing. But then the Georgian government allowed the Russian guy to sit in the chair of the speaker of the parliament and lead this assembly in Russian language. And when this was televised, this was all over the news. People saw that the Russian MP, who also has fought against Georgia and participated in a war against Georgia back in the 90s, is in our parliament, basically leading the assembly in a language that is of the occupiers of Georgia, right? You've heard the occupation. So people stormed to the streets, including me. I was I was new at my back then at my job, but I had to sneak out. I just couldn't be there. I couldn't contain myself to not go and participate in the rallies, so I did. And a lot of people came there. I think roughly maybe like 40,000 people. Not that much if you compare it to this year's protest. But back then we thought, wow, so many people. And this is what it says, Sirtshulia, which is basically a Georgian word for shame movement, which was the first ever Facebook event that we created that day. We didn't know each other. None of the, from the people who then founded the shame movement, almost none of them knew each other. But this was something sporadic, something random, that up to like 15 people inside the capital city of Tbilisi just united under one cause in a matter of a few hours, and this just happened. So as you can see, like it's almost like 33,000 reactions, like 40,000 people went, said that I'm going to the event. Some of them said I'm interested, but then again, yeah, about like 30,000 people went to the streets. So as you can see on the top right corner, then that night, the government decided to disperse the rally very violently. They used the rubber bullets, tear gas, water cannons. 3 people lost their eyeballs because of the rubber bullets being hit right in their eyes. 240 people were injured, including, I think, 50 journalists who were wearing the press vests, but still the police were shooting at them. So it was very, very violent, a very tough and rough crackdown, and we were just lucky that no one lost their lives. Like, we were so lucky that police didn't kill anyone by accident or on their own decision. But yeah, this is how it all started. Then we said that, well, we should do something about it, and we had 3 holy demands. That's what we call them. One, of course, we should have some of this systemic solution to all of this, because when something happens in Georgia, and I think in most of the developing countries, is that people are angry at something, and this anger then just disperses, because you have this huge chunk of emotion. You try to mobilize around something, and then if you may achieve it, you may not, but then it just disappears somewhere. So we thought that we should turn this energy into something meaningful, something that would stay along the years. So the first demand that we had was the change of the electoral system. So we said that we should have fully proportional election system, because back then it was like we have 150 people in the parliament, and it was divided. Like half of them were elected proportionally, and half of them were elected with the majoritarian rule. And this gave a huge advantage to the government, no matter who was in the government, because they always had the strongholds in the regions of Georgia, and they would just mobilize 30, 40 seats in the parliament just like that. So we said that, well, better representation, fairer, and division of power was what's most important. Second one was to the Minister of the Interior Affairs to resign, Georgi Gacharia back then, who ordered the dispersal of the rally, and the police went all over the place. They violated a few tens of laws, and we wanted him to be punished. And of course, everyone who was arrested that day had to be released. So we accomplished. Well, okay, let's just stick to the presentation. On the 4th day of protest, I think it was 24th of June, the god, meaning the oligarch, this is the guy we have, said that let there be proportional election system. He thought that he would give up one of the demands in return of us being less motivated and then going back home. But no, we decided to keep moving and try to get the other 2 demands as well. They released the prisoners, I think, a few days after, all of them. But this guy, the one that you see, he said that I'm not planning to resign. I'm not planning to resign. So it was our goal to make him go, or make the others make him go. So we kept moving, but how? And that's when the creative part, that's when the youth student vibe comes into play. Mass protests from weird places, creative ways to do it, influencers involved, making it fun, making it cool, every major solution that was there. And some of them that were never imagined before, in Georgia at least, we tried those. So we had March of Freedom, the yellow cards that we show to the government, that would be basically a reference to the football game. When you show when a player gets a yellow card, there's a caution before they get the red card, which means you're off. Oops, sorry. Yeah, we had Musicians Against Occupation, where on 4th of July, I think 15 musicians or groups / bands participated in a huge concert on the main avenue of Georgia. So yeah, this is teaser for the event, and the strings that you saw at the start of the video represent, of course, the tribute to the people who lost their eyeballs. So we kind of had this as a symbol. We had 41 shames of Georgian Dream, 41 because that's their election number for the Georgian elections, and of course we are named the Shame Movement. So we just listed those out, just put it on the main avenue of Tbilisi, and people who were just walking around, even the tourists who didn't understand anything, but we would help them to translate, could see all of these things that they had done wrong. We had kind of a history class in response to Vladimir Putin, because that year, I think it was early August, or at least like late July, where he said some of the weirdest things about Georgian history. Just like I'm sure you've heard that Ukraine was not even a state. Lenin built Ukraine and created Ukraine. That type of things about Georgia, some weird, very inaccurate things from our history. So we just did this. We had a TV show right in the middle of the street outside the parliament called It's a Shame, which is, like, again, Sirtsvilia in Georgian. It sounds better in Georgian. And we tried to invite all the politicians, media professionals, youngsters, basically everyone at the microphone, to just be able for them to be able to talk to people. And then you can see the numbers, right? We reached 600,000, and this was only streamed on our YouTube and Facebook channels, like only there. We would just go on a Facebook Live and then we would stream it. Of course, no TV would allow any of the airtime for this type of a show. So we only had the social media back then, and our social media pages were not as strong as they are now, but we had a kind of a hype around us. So we managed to still get pretty good results, I think. We had about, I think, 10 episodes that summer. Yeah, it's even in terms of like gender division, almost 50-50. But of course, the youngsters are the ones who were following us the most. Yeah. How could we mobilize people around us? And of course, meaning around the cause that we were campaigning about. And back then, in 2019, we found a way that is still, I think, a very universal way of running your campaign when you're running a mass mobilization campaign. And it is the Facebook groups, which are very, very useful when you're doing any type of activism around any type of issue, right? For example, we have in Georgia, the parents of children who have basically cancer diagnosis. They are organizing themselves and demanding from the Ministry of Health of Georgia to basically create a program which would fund all the medical supplies for these kids. Yeah, I think it might sound silly that, especially coming from the EU citizens, that, well, a country might not have that type of a program, but yeah, Georgia still, of course, doesn't have good healthcare. So I'm just using this example to say that, well, no matter the issue, no matter the the content of it. Facebook groups are a very good solution to create a community around you, to grow, and then try to mobilize all of these people around your demand. So I'm going to tell you a tiny little bit of a story of how our Facebook group began. So in May 2018, the right-wing political groups, which are not the ones that you would call right-wing in Germany, for example, or in the EU, because our right-wingers are basically pro-Putinist. They are openly pro-Putinist. I mean, they say that, well, they receive money from Russia. We know that they officially, some of them, officially receive money from Russia, but unofficially, it's basically you could trace the money back to the Kremlin. So they are the proxy soft power of the Russian regime here in Georgia. But so these right-wing groups were calling for the closure of Georgia's very famous nightclub Bassiani, which is a venue that, I think faced a struggle to remain open, because at least once a year something happens around this club. Some of the very religious radical groups mobilize around it and say that, well, this is the kind of a sin, place where sin happens and all this weird stuff. But so they struggled a lot. But later that month, I think it was like 20th of May, I think. The other club gallery and the Bassiani club were hit with the armed police raids, with policemen with machine guns storming the dance floors while the people were there. And this sparked a huge outrage from the rave community, the public, the DJs around the world. And this is what happened. You see just a picture of what happened. We basically had a rave in front of a parliament in the middle of the street, right after the day that the raids happened. So we created a group called Freedom Fighters. It's a rough translation. So as you can see, it was May 15th. I'm sorry, May 15th, 2018. Our friend, one of the founders of the Shame Movement, Salome, created this group. And Mariam Bajeliza was made an admin, again, one of the founders of the Shame Movement. This is the screen from back then, the prime minister who said some weird stuff about the protests. Of course, lies, saying that, well, the freedom of speech is protected, etc., etc. And then you could see that this post had a very big amount of like reactions, unusual for the prime minister's Facebook account. So when you clicked on the likers, you would see, I'm not sure if you see it, but these are bot accounts, mostly from Pakistan or India or Indonesia. Well, the names, I mean, of these so-called people. And we thought that they were buying bots. They would just buy followers and bots that would like or comment on their posts. And this is very funny in Georgian, but you don't understand because it's not a universal language. But these latex shoes, which you wear outside, for example, when it's on a rainy day, in Georgian they are called bots. So we just took them to the government's administration building and said that, well, the source of power is people, not bots. So this is how this group kind of got around, right? We had some fun. We protested some of these things. We also had social media protests by, for example, liking or reacting to something or sharing and commenting on them, etc., etc. But this group created and grew into a community where people would say that, well, if you were interested in politics, in activism, in any of the public life issues, you would know that these groups exist, and you would go there, join it, and then try to get involved and engaged. The government even created the fake group, which was named exactly like that, with like 70 members, as you can see right here. And they tried to mislead people and spread fake news. And our response was to create a group called Anti-Bot. Anti-Bot would unite people who are our digital activists. And whenever someone could identify a bot, a troll, or a fake page or a fake profile, they would just post in our group that, well, this is the account or from them, and everyone from the group would go on and report this account or page or whatever. 2 times, Facebook, like nowadays Meta, they removed the coordinated unauthentic network operated by the Georgian government, and this is a quote. This is not my interpretation. Which would spread fake news, misinformation, and hate speech among the Georgian public. So Facebook basically accused, and they had proof of it, the Georgian government that they were running fake news campaigns to confuse the Georgian people. This was huge. Against our protest, we had a variety of propaganda. For example, one would suggest that this is a logo of one of the oppositional parties, suggesting that all of our members were ruled or influenced from this political party, or that our members were part of the LGBTQ community. I know this sounds ridiculous, but in Georgia, they at least consider this to be a insult, so they would create this weird, sometimes maybe kind of funny graphics, and then what the hell, like, I don't know why is one of our founding members illustrated as Lenin. No one knows that, but okay. And our response was to just have fun about it, and we would create all these photos and just say that, well, we don't care, we have issues around us that is much bigger than ours, and no matter what you do, we're going to continue our cause. So yeah, I think we just started having fun from the things that we used to do, because everything will kill you, so you got to choose something fun. And we found some cheap and creative ways to protest. For example, we had these big banners. We brought sheep to the parliament, which is again a very funny thing in Georgian, but I'll try to make it funny for you as well, because sheep is like when you a lot of Georgians call some other people sheep, which is a metaphor for them to be obedient to some others, for them to be following others orders. So we just brought this sheep near the parliament as an illustration of how the government MPs were behaving, because they were just following the orders of one man. None of the ships were harmed. They were just gifted to kind people on the farm, so they're good. We organized the physical flash mob near the Ministry of Justice, because of the Minister of Justice, again, using the trolls and bots on her Facebook posts. And we had, for example, one-man protest in Georgia's small city every day, who said that I'm gonna be here today, tomorrow, in my country's service, and I won't get tired of it. So this guy was there for about 100 days. We had street art, which were removed by the city town hall, or city hall, as you call it. All right. Oops, my Siri. When I said city hall, Siri suggested the address of Tbilisi City Hall. Sorry. So yeah, as you can see, it just went viral. Like everywhere, from almost every place of the planet, people would just send these pictures to us that say that, well, it's a shame. You gotta join the rally, go to the streets, etc., etc. Yeah, lots of places, lots of people. Of course, the merch was important. How youthful we might have looked, and how this girl, of course, yeah, I gotta explain it now. She was the one of the 3 that lost her eyeball, because the rubber bullet hit her eye directly. This was also funny when Ivanishvili, the oligarch, said that, well, there are like some 200 demonstrants on the streets. So we just had these numbers printed on papers and then distributing it to people, and then we would just raise it. And of course, everyone could see that it was way more than 200. So going back to how youth activism, student activism is evolved, and how it can grow into a successful campaign. Communication is the key for that. So these are all screenshots from our old Facebook group. And as you can see, there are lots of polls. There are lots of questions. There are lots of asks for donation. For example, right, this one here, which would list the items that we needed to buy. So what we did back then was to have people involved as much as possible. And by people, I mean not the organizing group that we, for example, us, like 20-ish people who were gathering at one of our friends' house, but I mean the people, like the public, who would vote, for example, the speakers, who is the person you would like to see at the rally, of like addressing to people, and they would just choose these people. What do you think would be the best demands for us to have for the rallies? And they would choose the demands, they would choose the causes that we could be campaigning about. What are the creative ways we could have protests for the next few days? These are all the questions that we would ask people, and they would answer with the polls, with their comments, with their reactions, and this would create a sense of belonging for them, a sense of, I have a say in this. I have something that I am involved in, and I can contribute and influence as well. So this managed to create a community around the shame movement, which would turn into a bigger civil society movement. And this is a very important part, because up until 2019, the civil society in Georgia was almost non-existent. And what I mean by that is that, of course, there were NGOs, of course, there were CSOs that did some stuff, but what they did was a very technocratic work. They would create reports about corruption. They would create investigative journalist pieces and articles, which are very, very important, because they always help to check and keep the government in check. But none of those things could mobilize people in the streets and around a certain topic. We didn't have any tradition that people would mobilize around certain topics and issues and then try to achieve that their demand around the issue. So this is how the civil society and Georgian public and the youngsters and the students step by step got involved into activism. And I'm not trying to brag about the shame movement right now, but yes, sure. Like if I wasn't a member of the shame movement, I would still say that they were the pioneers of the whole Georgian civil society. And for those who might not have heard of Georgian civil society, what it's like today, I'm gonna go to the present times in the next few slides as well. We fast forward to spring 2024. Of course, a lot of things happened in these 5 years, but I'm not going to talk about them right now because they are too specific. For example, we had support rallies for Ukraine when the full-scale invasion broke out. We had a campaign about the judicial clan that we have, basically a network of judges within the judiciary system who are corrupt and try to serve the interests of the government, and etc., etc. We did many stuff. But now I think the spring of 2024 was the time when the world heard about Georgia and Georgia's civil society. And I'm going to show you a short video that we created. This is just we were asking for donations from the international public. This is a video created by the Shame Movement. I was the one who participated in it. And this was done in middle of May, so the protest went on for about a month after that as well. But still, you get a feeling of what happened in spring this year.
Georgians have protested peacefully for over a month, with some of the largest demonstration in the modern history of the country. Self-organized groups of the nation stand in solidarity to defend the country's European future. While the country's youth are devoted to the pro-European agenda, the Georgian dream confronts its citizens with rubber bullets, tear gas, water cannons, and pepper spray. Policemen and hired mobs beat the demonstrators with extreme brutality ambush them at their homes and offices, call from unknown numbers on their cell phones, and try to intimidate them. Despite the regime's desperate methods, the fight persists, and we need your support. Please share this video with your friends and colleagues and raise awareness about the current situation in Georgia. Contribute whatever you can to aid the protesters and movements. We continue to fight against Russian imperialism, and we will bring Georgia home.
Okay. Oops. Yeah. Some of the key phrases that there as well: Russian law, the protests, and the government's methods. Okay. Now, why I cannot skip to the next slide? I don't know. Okay, I'll try now. Yeah, sure. You get a sense of what was going on in Georgia during the spring, and this is what we did, like precisely the shame movement, what we did, and of course what the people would do during these days. And it's so funny. We had a very creative Georgian students and youngsters with a very creative banners. For example, these Barbies not okay with the Russian law. And I'll explain what the Russian law is. This person, the lady in the center, is holding a sign that says, "We Megrelians are not afraid of the pepper spray." Megrelia is a part of the like a region of Georgia, which is famous of their cuisine with very spicy food, and they could eat the peppers which are so spicy that, well, a normal person could not. So she's kind of making fun of the government's methods. Some of the very funny photos, for example, a random dude sitting in the middle of the street on a chair. I don't know how he found this chair and why did he decide to do it, because in a few hundred meters there's literally police raiding the rally. So yeah, I don't know. This is a very inspiring image for me, because this old person, clearly an old person, is holding the EU flag, which cannot be dear to him. He has not lived in these times, but still, this is a cause that we are united about, where the students and the youngsters managed to unite the country around, and where the older generation managed to be involved as well. And on the right, I think this is solely from the shame movement, what we did. For example, the upper right corner says, "Where were you during the previous government times?" And this is a very specific thing. So the current government, whenever there's a critique around them and direct at them, they would kind of counter this critique and saying that, well, where were you? Why weren't you talking during the time of the previous government? Why were you silent at that time? So basically, since we were so young during the previous government times, for example, I was 13 years old when the government changed, and for the last 12 years we have the same government in power. We created this Facebook frame, an Instagram frame with this writing that where were you during the previous government, and then me during the previous government times. And people would just upload their pics from, for example, 2012, 2018, 2010, and even the previous years. For example, this person that you see here is a very famous photographer that captures the photos from the protests at most times. And even back then, he was part of the activist student movement, which was against the previous government. And the sign here on his head, on the headband, says that "I'm not afraid." And this is from the times where the youth were organizing rallies against the previous government. And in the bottom right corner, you see like a frame again, more like a digitally branded frame, saying that, well, it's me who serves Georgia. And this is a direct answer to the slogan of the Georgian police, which says "serving Georgia" or "in Georgia's service." So this would say that, well, it's not you, the police officers, who beat the demonstrators, who kidnapped them, who ambushed them, etc., but us that serve the interests of our country. And in both of these things were so viral that even the officials had to respond to it and saying that, well, this is a provocation and all this weird stuff. And I just included this photo because you can see the flag that I showed you earlier in one of the first few slides, the old flag of Georgia. Some random person took it to the streets, and this is a very nice photo during the butter cannon dispersal, the rally. And I've been telling you a story of how the Georgian civil society grew from time to time, and how the students and youth activism made and created basically the civil society of Georgia into what it is today. And what it is today, I think this footage from the like the drone footage from one of the rallies, I think it's middle. So people are chanting Georgia, Georgia, etc. But what's the most important is that this right here is the biggest demonstration in the history of Georgia. According to different sources, there were 250 to 300,000 people that night in the streets of Tbilisi. So a protest that started with a few people just uniting under one roof to plan the protest next day. And out of those 15 people, almost none of them knew each other, has created a tradition where the youngsters, our parents, the grandparents can engage in the protest activities, in the raise awareness campaigns, into online activism. And all of this is thanks to the students, a few number of students that did this first. Sorry. So my presentation was named the Reimagining Youth Activism or Student Activism through Social Media. And I'm so glad that social media exists. I'm so glad that basically every person, almost every person owns a smartphone. They could capture something. They could become journalists in a matter of a few seconds and capture something that could change the whole course of the country and its history. And of course, among all of these, the students and the youngsters are leading the way, are leading by example, and are trying to change the world for the good. I've been solely and exclusively talking about my country, but I thought that this was relevant because of the things that were going on this spring, I mean, and because of the very important elections that we have coming up in October, just as Paulina mentioned. And we are doing a get out the vote campaign. We, as the Shame Movement and other groups of the civil society as well. This is how it looks like, our campaign. It says, to the elections, everyone. Basically saying that, well, this is a universal duty to go on and vote. And I've been voting for, like 7 years already, and never have I ever seen these many people involved in the get out the vote campaigns, voter education campaigns, voter observation preparations as I see this year. And of course, again, who are these people? They are students and they are youngsters. And it all began by realizing the responsibility that you have within first, of course, protecting your own individual liberty, protecting the liberty of your community, and then protecting yourself as a country in case you have an aggressor or a challenge coming from outside the country. And unfortunately, Georgia has that in the face of Russia, and the occupation that we mentioned a few times during this talk is still ongoing. Is still a very challenging issue for Georgia, but we keep going until we have something that we would call a win. So these are a few of our web pages. Just any of the platforms, you would find us at Shame Movement. That's our name tag. everywhere. So please go ahead and follow if you're interested. And that's it. Thanks. I'm open now to receiving any and all of your questions, be it the chat or with the microphone. Thank you.
Thank you, Dahi, for this amazing, very insightful talk. I enjoyed it a lot, and I'm sure so did the rest of the audience. Maybe I can start with the first question. One thing that came to my mind is that in Germany's history, student activism also played a big role in how major things changed in the country. And what I was wondering, as I'm also a part of Students for Liberty, is we're always talking about young people making a difference, and we're also talking a lot about students. Why is it, do you think, that especially students from all young people play such an important role in seeing where there's change need to be done and actually taking action, like organizing events, campaigns, protests to actually make for a better and freer future?
Yeah, that's a great question, because I always try to not refer to the youngsters as students, like, because in Georgian context, that's kind of a common thing. For example, if you talk to the generation of my parents or my grandparents, they would refer to the youth as students. And I do think that this is a bit of a different thing, because students, at least in Georgia, are perceived as the ones who are currently having the higher education, getting the higher education now. So these people have graduated school, they're at least legal age, and they're studying right now in the universities or colleges, right? But youngsters are more than that. They are, like, for example, people who may not have turned a legal age, or they are maybe 30 plus. Of course, they're young still, but the students, they are the ones who are getting these ideas and education about liberalism, about individual liberty, freedom, about prosperity, and all of these things, all the values that we cherish at the moment. So they are the ones who see how these values were protected and created and fought for during the centuries and years in the previous times. So they value it more. And if you again go into a context of, for example, Georgians, right? The generation of my grandparents, we have people in Georgia who have not lived any time except the Soviet times. So imagine how their worldview would be shaped. They would not know anything about freedom. They would just know about communism. They would just know about state interfering in people's lives, about state killing people just because they're not loyal to the party or they're not communist enough or whatever BS. And they might not be caring that much about the ideas that we care about more, right? But for example, me, I was born in independent Georgia. I was born in time when Georgia was independent, where freedom was valued, where people would respect the individual liberty of each other and of the community as well. And those values are so normal, so natural for me, and of course for the other students and youngsters, that they perceive the threat of losing these values as a very essential, very existential threat to how their identity is shaped. So I do think that students are involved and more motivated because of these reasons. First, education and their everyday life, of how they get involved and engage with these ideas and values and information. And of course, the sense of, I gotta protect them, because otherwise, how can I protect myself as an individual, as a person, right? So yeah, I think that those are the reasons, and thank you for the question. I see one question in the chat, so I'm gonna read it out loudly. So as you showed in the beginning, there is like a tradition of protesting. Was this essential for starting the movement in 2018? Yeah, that's a great question. Of course it is. And when I say that there is a tradition in Georgia, for example, of protesting, of the youth and student groups mobilizing around stuff, Of course, that's true, and I showed some specific examples, and I did not include much more of that, but I would say that in 2019, when we were starting, this tradition was so forgotten, I would say, because there were things happening from time to time, like maybe a police brutality case would happen and people would storm to the streets, but this would last for like 2-3 days, and that's it. For example, in 2017, like just 2 years before our movement started, there was a group, like a boy band or something, like two guys were there, not even a band, who made a music video where they had the police officer on a leash, referring to them as dogs or something, whatever like this. So this was a skit, of course. And you know what Georgian police did? They were arrested in the middle of the street of Tbilisi, and they found drugs in their pockets. Out of the blue, they were carrying a few grams of MDMA in the center of Tbilisi. And this happened solely because one of the police officers or chiefs or whoever just saw this video and was offended and said that, well, I'm going to go and arrest these people. So imagine if such thing happened in France, for example. They are the ones who protest quite fiercely, right? The whole of the Paris would be in flames. But in Georgia, we came out to the streets. It lasted for about like a day and a half. One of them was released. The other was not. The other was charged. But then people just forgot about it. Like even me, I'm not trying to blame others. I was getting ready for my national exams that year. I was graduating my high school, so I was like confused. I didn't know much about it, but I had some other stuff to do, so I just forgot about it. Fortunately, the other guy was released a few weeks after as well. But I mean, this tradition was almost evaporated because of how people could not. The youngsters were so. I don't want to sound too judging, but they would not care enough. Of course, they would care so that there was stuff happening, as I mentioned. But in 2019, we saw that now we have a barrier in front of us that we cannot just go around. We have to go over it. So that's how we said that, well, we are not going home until we achieve something meaningful. So again, answering to your question, the tradition helps because of the collective memory that we know that, well, we have a history back then. We have parents who fought there, so we could use some stuff from there. We could get some inspiration from them. We could learn something from them. We could learn from their mistakes, but we had to start from scratch still. Okay. By the way, I cannot see the YouTube stream, so if there are questions in the chat there as well, please help me to get these questions, and I'll happily answer to them.
Yeah, I also actually can't see questions from the stream, so I might once again ask a question myself. I was wondering, we're always talking about like making, for example, the shame movement, really moving masses of people, getting a crowd to actually do something, these protests, etc. And sometimes I think, especially if you're a young person, for example, fresh out of high school, this might seem a bit overwhelming, So what advice would you give, especially young people who really want to get into that, who see there's something to be done or there's an issue they want to have resolved, fixed, addressed, whatever? What do you think would be a good starting point to get into youth activism? If there's someone who says, I want to do something about this and that, where should one start?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think my personal experience would help with that answer. So I'm not the founding member of the shame movement. So, I'm there from day one, but still I was not the one who would go on and sign the papers for the founding of the organizations. And I'm underlining this because I got involved with the shame movement because of one of the founding members. So I had a friend, to this day I still have a friend, Zuka, who is one of the founding members. And when this whole thing happened, I was just a random protester, a random participant. I did not do anything back then. I did not organize anything. I had no experience in whatsoever. I was in my second year in university. So I just saw the guy at the rally with around the microphone or something, and I'm like, I want to help. I want to contribute. I have some of the intellectual resource. I have energy. I have time. I have motivation. I can contribute to the cause somehow. So I went to him and I said, "What do you need help with?" And he was like, let me think. And that night I followed him to the meeting point of the other activists, and we tried to brainstorm the ideas for what's going to happen tomorrow, because we didn't have any plan back then. It was just happening right away. So that's how I got involved with the shame movement, by just asking a question, coming up to them, and then asking a question: do you need any help with something? I can do lots of stuff. Because, and this is a very, very radical case in terms of a very specific one, because I didn't know much to do, like how to do it, what to do, and how to do it. But I knew that I had motivation. But if you're a student, if there is a student who has some sort of a intellectual resource, some sort of a information, or some skills that they could benefit to the bigger cause, I would just advise these people to just go and ask people around the same issue. Should we do something? Do you need my help to do it? Like, can I contribute with something? Because that's how it goes. Like, no one will. Of course, there are people and there are initiatives who maybe ask for help from the others. Like, for example, we need volunteers, we need donations, we need something from you of how can you support the movement or the protest or the cause. But that doesn't always happen, because people might not think that, well, anyone would reach out. We should not ask for help. It's just us that gotta do stuff. So I would advise to people that if you want to do something, if you want to get involved into meaningful campaigning about certain issues, just find your allies. And when you find them, try to form connections and coalition with them to then actually do stuff, right? To create content, to create communication, to organize events, rallies, demonstrations, talk to journalists, talk to media, maybe travel and talk to others, just like I was supposed to come to Germany, but unfortunately I couldn't. And that's how you grow. That's how you grow as an individual activist, as a student activist, and of course as a movement and as a group. I have one question in the chat. Did your goals change over time? And if they did, what are your aims now? Yeah, definitely. Of course, our goals changed, especially when we reached and got our first demand with the proportional elections system this year in 2024. We're going to have fully proportional elections. But we saw that, again, this is a very specific Georgian context, but since they invited Russian MP, and we also, like most of the Georgian public, a lot of them at least, had a sense and feeling and idea that the current government that we have is loyal to Russia. Some of us even call them pro-Russian, but that's up for debate still, unfortunately. Let's say loyal to Russia, right, to the Kremlin. We thought that, well, now we cannot have business as usual with them, try to demand the change of certain policies in order to polish these stains that they have and try to pretend that we're a normal country. No, we're not. We are an authoritarian country, another authoritarian country in the region, just like Turkey or Azerbaijan or, of course, Russia. So we aimed for ourselves to change the government, but of course we couldn't do this as an activist group. We couldn't participate in the elections. So what we did from then, we organized 2 get out the vote campaigns for the previous elections, like parliamentary elections and the local self-government elections. We organized raised awareness campaigns during COVID times. We had kind of human-centered, or whatever you call it, campaign because Georgia is a poor country, and a lot of people were basically not not able to have access to medicine and some basic supplies. So we had this volunteer campaign, which was joined by 200 plus companies, 500 plus volunteers, and we would distribute a basket of basic supplies of medicine, clothes, food to the families in need. We visited up to, I think, more than 5,000 households. So again, this is just an example of how our goals shifted from time to time. For example, I'm wearing the Ukrainian T-shirt right now, and this is from the time when we had the pro-Ukrainian support rallies, where we gathered and collected some of the items that could be useful for the Ukrainians during the first few days of the war, and we sent them to them. Again, medicine, basic supplies to them. So Shame movement kind of became this critical voice of the civil society, part of the civil society. Of course, I don't want to brag and pretend that say that, well, Shame movement has been the voice of the civil society. No, of course, the other groups are there. They are as strong as ever right now. But I mean, in the previous years, it's how we built it. So we had the raise awareness campaigns, get out the word campaigns, support rallies for Ukraine. Then Ukraine, Georgia, and Moldova applied for the EU membership, and we also campaigned about that campaign called Home to Europe, basically underlining the Georgia's alignment to the European civilization, etc., etc. So right now, what we're doing is that we try to showcase how corrupt our government is, how they're having this back channeling with Russians, and sometimes not back channeling, but directly talking to them and arranging their positions with the Russian state. And we're openly saying that, well, we should change the government, but of course this has to happen democratically, like with the elections. And we always advocate for systemic reforms. Like whenever when there's something happening, you would not see Shame movement just going out to the street and shouting some stuff. We would always find solutions that would be systematic reforms for the certain causes, for example, for judiciary, for, again, electoral system, etc., etc. And again, every time, like all the time, all the 5 years that we've been active, our activism has been non-violent. This is our core founding principle, that our activism is non-violent. This is moral and pragmatic as well. Moral because we don't see violence as a instrument to achieve change, and of course, then you have a pragmatic argument that whenever you read any type of a protest material from around the globe, and when you gather this experience of how the protest movement succeeded, none of them were violent in its core. Of course, some stuff has been happening, for example, just like in Georgia, because whenever police hits you with the rubber bullet, you got to protect yourself, and you got to, I don't know, do something about it. So it's non-violent in our core, but yeah, sometimes things happen. So yeah, our goals did change from time to time, and now we aim to get Georgia into the EU, somehow try to help with this cause. And whenever there's a public outrage, dissatisfaction with the government, we try to always shift this process into a democratic, systemic flow, when people would get meaningful results with the help of reforms, mobilization around it, and etc. So yeah. Oh, sorry.
All right. I don't see any more questions in the chat, and also think there's no more questions in the YouTube live stream. So I'd like to once again thank you very, very much, Dachi, for taking the time, for giving us this amazing presentation and sharing your experience with us. I really enjoyed it. Yeah, and I think with that, I can wish everyone to have a nice evening, and hope to see you all again sometime or another at whatever event. And yeah, so thank you.
Thank you so much. It was wonderful to join you for the evening. Thank you.
Well then, goodbye, everyone.